now that we've gone over some of the CSG operations, how to create a brush, move it around, and the axis constraints and the local and world space movements, let's actually make these boxes into something recognizable as a room. So when I created these solids originally, let's go ahead and delete it so I only have one of these bad boys. Now keeping in mind that the player size is 2 units of these tall, so you want to make sure that you make your walls accordingly. Generally in Nexuiz we make all of our shapes and all of our structures very big. That was one of our goals from the beginning, was to make everything seem just really big in size and grand. That was kind of always our overall goal. We try to stay away from narrow spaces and things like that. So let's create a room that's 20 by 20 on the X and Y. Now paying attention to this 72 down here, that's going to be the X axis. That's going to be like the length of it. So as I move this down, you can see that number start to change. I'm going to move that down to 20. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the Y. You can see now, right here, it's 56. Let's move that down to 20. I generally, you won't have to do too much on the Z-axis, but it can sometimes just make you digest the overall feel of your level better, depending on what you want. Like, let's say this is going to be a tower. So if it's a tower and I want it to represent a tower, I'm just going to go ahead and bring it all the way down to the ground. So now I got my floor. Now here's the biggest trick and secret. Whenever you build one solid, that's generally the only time you need to do it. You really don't need to make any more solids. The trick after this is copying and pasting and just moving around. So whenever you copy an object, it's going to move along the axis you currently have selected. Again, you can click an axis here or up here on the top and choose what axis you want to copy on. So I'm going to create the ceiling first, so I want to copy this along the Z axis. I'm going to press Control C, and that's going to allow me to copy and paste this along the axis. As you can see, it moves up. One thing you're going to notice when you're copying around, you see that like jumping around, and that's because there's like issues with the mouse not hitting the terrain, so it doesn't know how to move. Whenever you're copying, make sure you have the terrain in sight and you're copying alongside that. Just get it generally into a space. You'll notice whenever you're copying, you're not even holding the mouse down or anything. It's just there. When you click again, it will stop moving. Now this definitely doesn't look right, so let's go into edit mode and make it something usable. So I'm going to make the Z height, right now it's 107 units. I'm going to make that, let's say, 4. Okay, so I know this is 4 units deep. And with that in mind, I know that the pivot point is in the center of this. So the pivot, since it's in the center of 4 units on the Z, that means the pivot's actually 2 units in. So holding the shift button, again, it tells me how many units far away from the floor this ceiling is going to be. Now this says 56, but keep in mind the pivot's 2 units away from the edge of the bottom of this box. So that actually means for the bottom of this box, it's actually 54 units. So if I want walls that are going to be, let's say, 10 units high, I'm going to try to move this down to 12. I'm holding shift that whole time, and you can see that Z. That's really useful. Okay, now that I have that in place, I'm going to again just press Control C and drag the box down, making sure it's touching this floor. And you can easily see that because SSDO will usually give you a good visual of what's going on. Once you have it in place, go into edit mode, select one of these front faces, move along the X into, let's say, let's make the wall 2 units deep. Generally, you want to make sure your walls are pretty thick, because even though CryEngine 3 does do damage occlusion, like let's say you're behind a wall, there's a rocket explosion, and you're on the other side of the wall, you don't want to be hit by that. We took that out with Nexuiz for performance gains across the network. So keep that in mind, so we don't have that in Nexuiz. So the thicker your walls, the better. So once I have this 2 units deep, I'm going to go ahead and make sure the Z height connects up to the ceiling. And you can see over here, it says 10. That was my target, and I met it. So now that I have one wall made, I'm I'm going to quickly grab it. On the x-axis, Control C, and it's copying again along that axis I have selected. Make sure you have it placed there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy this and rotate it. So, easy way to do that, I'll click the X, Y, Control C, just so it'll give me ability to get down here quickly. I'll go to rotate it 90 degrees, move it into place, go into edit mode, select this face that's popping out, and make sure this wall is nice and inset into the other solids. Go ahead and select that, press the Y axis there, or X depending on your current situation, copy it along the Y axis, and there you have it. You have a very simple room inside this tower. Now you may be thinking to yourself, why didn't I just create a cube inside this tower, put it in there, and just use a subtraction or the difference? The main reason why you don't want to do something like that is because I'm going to cut up these walls a little bit more. And whenever you do something like one of those CSG operations like cut or something, you can really mess up the mesh. Like you will have a lot more polys, a lot more splits. If you try to do any editing afterwards, it can get really messy and cause a lot of errors. So I prefer to keep it as simple solids as possible, as much as possible, and only do the CSG operations if I absolutely think I'm done editing this mesh. So now I have a room created, I'm going to want to create some a door and some windows. So let's create the door first. I'm going to copy again, just select one of these, copy it on the axis that's running. Let me put this right here in front of it. Go into editing mode and create the door. Let's do something like 6 units wide. You want something like that, kind of wide doorways, especially with Nexuiz, because the speed you run, players are constantly pogoing and stuff like that. So keep that in mind whenever you're making a door. Now, if I was to make something that was as tall as a player, that's how small it would be. You don't usually want to do that in Nexuiz, again, because players are going to be pogoing. When they're pogoing or some of the dynamic mutators are turned on, they're going to be going up a lot, and you don't want to be clipping them too much. Let's go ahead and make this door frame 5 units tall. You notice how I'm making it, make sure it's poking through this side. I'm going to come inside here. If you can't see it on here, just move the camera slightly into this solid so you can see that face. Select the opposing side and make sure it's poking all the way through. Okay, I have the shape generally where I want. Now, let's get it aligned right into the center. Now this is where it's really useful, and you're glad the pivot point's right in the center of this mesh. If I hold shift, it's going to show me these numbers on the left and right. You can see this red 7 and 9. If I move it around, I want these both to be the same, and that's letting me know this is dead center of these solids on the opposing sides. Okay, using the CSG operations we went over earlier, I'm going to first select the wall, then I'm going to select what I want cut out, and click difference. And there you go, you have a door frame. Now let's make some windows. Again, Control C is your friend. We want to make some windows, but let's just make it for some aesthetic appealing right now, even though it's, not really super aesthetic at this point. You can also consider this if players are using something like jetpacks and things like that. Windows are good ways for them to shoot in. Something 2 units by 2 units, and maybe something 6 units tall. Let's go ahead and extend this so whenever I cut it, it's going to be easier to use. Okay, now that I have this in place, before I cut, let's actually go ahead, since I want these windows tiling along both sides, let's go ahead and put these cutouts in place. One really useful thing is the default texture that you see applied to these solids. Every single place you could see the checkered, there's the black and the white and the white and the black, like in a square shape. That means it's one unit. So you can easily visually look and tell that here on the, this is centered between those, because you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you know this is centered. Now that I got these in place, I want windows on the other side too, so I'm going to go ahead and copy these over. Okay, so here's the really cool part. Select your parent, select the child, difference. Again, do it again with the next one, and again with the next one. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now you got some windows in your nice little room there. After I'm done making all these cuts, I want to make sure I press the Reset X Form button. That'll make sure there's no irregularities when rendering, physics, or anything else that might happen with this mesh. Okay, so let's just keep this real simple. Let's not get overly complicated with it and stuff like that. Let's make a bridge that will extend out of this room, and we're going to copy this tower and just make it so these two rooms are facing each other, so you get in some little outside action. So, one of the easiest way, again, to do this is to copy and paste as always. And since it's going to be more so of a horizontal, the bridge, let's use a horizontal piece. A small piece like the ceiling will do nice. So just Control C, copy, move it into place. Make it a little bit smaller on the sides here. Let's just go ahead and use 2 units on the sides. Let's make this bridge 30 units long. I want to put some little, just some rails, just so players aren't accidentally falling over the edge all the time. Can be easily done. Copy along the Z to get it up on top. Let's make this 1 unit by 1 unit. And that would be about waist high on the player. Control C on the X-axis to easily copy it over on the other side of the bridge. Now there you have it. You have a bridge. Just a heads up, what you're seeing here with this, the lighting's kind of popping, it's moving in and out. That's a screen space global illumination. Turn that off if you don't want to see it anymore. You think it's too bright or something. And just a little checkbox in the display tab. Global illumination. I'll get rid of it. Okay, so now we want to copy and rotate this tower to the other side of this bridge. Really easy way to do that, and it's very important why I'm going to show you this. Let's go ahead and select this tower over here. Drag a box, select it. You notice it selected the bridge. You can easily do this by countering it with an Alt select that subtracts your current selection. Drag a box on the opposing side to get rid of that bridge selection. Now when you're copying this over, make sure on the Y constraint, copy over. Now to rotate it, go to the rotate tool, and you'll notice that by default, usually in the local rotate space, what's going to happen here is a serious problem because it's rotating every single object on its own pivot. So when I start rotating this 180 degrees, you're going to see it just explode and do its own thing. You don't want that to happen. So make sure you go into the world space and everything will rotate how it's supposed to. Once you have it rotated 180 degrees, go back to the move tool, move down on the Y until it snaps into place. And there you have it. You got 2 rooms facing each other across the bridge pretty easily.